Alright, welcome to the video on our 2.3 notes, the product and quotient rule. So today when we studied sum and difference of derivatives, we could just add the sum of derivatives together, or we could just subtract them and be done. The product and quotient rule are a little more involved. So the product rule says that the product of two functions f and g is the first function. So here, if we're looking at the product of f of x and g of x, the derivative is the first function times the derivative of the second. So that would be f of x times the derivative of g of x plus the second function g of x times the derivative of the first function f prime of x. Or we could switch the order. You can see they just took this part and put it at the front over here. So the derivative of f of x times g of x plus f of x times the derivative of g of x. So each time you're taking the derivative of one function and multiplying it by the original of the other. Okay, we don't have a PowerPoint presentation. Let's go to the first example. So you don't have to do this every time, but to start, I think it's helpful to actually identify f and g and find their derivatives. So the derivative of f of x, this should be hopefully straightforward after our practice today. So the derivative of 3x is just 3 minus the derivative of 2x squared. Derivative of 2x squared is 2 times 2x to the first. So that simplifies to 3 minus 4x. Let's do g of x in a different color. All right. The derivative of g of x, the derivative of 5 is just 0, and the derivative of 4x is 4. So this one is easy, it's just 4. Okay, so when we are finding the derivative of the overall function, h of x, we want to have the derivative of f of x, so that's f prime of x times g of x, plus the derivative of g of x times f of x. Okay, so in this case, the derivative of f of x was 3 minus 4x, and g of x, going back to the original function, was 5 plus 4x. Then g prime of x, we said was 4, and f of x, going back to the original up here, was 3x minus 2x squared. Okay. So now we just distribute. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 4x is 12x. Negative 4x times 5 is negative 20x. Negative 4x times positive 4x is negative 16x squared. 4 times 3x is 12x. And 4 times negative 2x squared is negative 8x squared. So now we just combine like terms. We have negative 16x squared and negative 8x squared, so that's negative 24x squared. We had negative 20x, 12x, and 12x, so that makes 4x, and then we had 15 here, so plus 15. All right, so that's actually our final answer. H prime of x is negative 24x squared plus 4x plus 15. Okay, so let's think about this for a second. Going back to this original function here, did we have to use the product rule to find the derivative? Well, let's think about our lesson today, the sum and difference rule. This morning, this afternoon, we were able to just actually multiply out f and g and then use the sum and difference rule. Let's see if we get the same answer when we do it that way. I'm going to scroll down here. Oops, to the next page for me. Okay, so looking at our original function, we had 3x minus 2x squared times 5 plus 4x. We could multiply that out. I would get 15x plus 12x squared minus 10x squared minus 8x cubed. combining like terms, 15x plus 2x squared minus 8x cubed. All right, like we did today, let's find the derivative using the sum and difference rules. The derivative of 15x is just 15. The derivative of, let's see, that was a positive 2x, would be 4x. And then here we have 8 times 3 because we're bringing the 3 down. So that's 24x squared. Is that the same result that we got before? Yes, it's just ordered differently. So if I wanted, I could rewrite it as negative 24x squared plus 4x plus 15. So in this case, both the product rule works to find the derivative, or you can expand the original function and then find the derivative using the sum and difference rules. All right, let's move on to trig, example 2. All right, so hopefully you remember that the derivative of sine is cosine. It's going to be really important for this problem. So in this case, h of x is just y, right? Oops, h of x. And then our f of x function is x, and g of x is sine of x. So let's find f prime of x. We're going to use the product rule. The derivative of just plain x is 1. The derivative of g of x, sine of x, we said was cosine of x. So using the product rule here, when I go to find h prime of x, remember I'm going to take the derivative of the first function, multiply by the second, and then add the derivative of the second function times the first function. Okay, and I think I actually just switched the order there. We had been writing f of x times g prime of x. So let me switch it back to the way we were writing it before. Okay, so we said f prime of x is just 1. G of x is cosine of x. F of x was x, and g prime of x, whoops, sorry. I took the derivative there and I shouldn't have. F prime of x is 1. G of x was just sine of x. So this should be sine of x. Then we have f of x is x. G prime of x, that's the derivative of sine. That's cosine of x. Okay, so that means h prime of x, final answer is just sine of x plus x cosine of x. All right, that's that one. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, here we get to use both the product rule and the sum rule. So I really have 2 chunks to this. I have the 2x times cosine of x. I'm going to use the product rule there. And then I have this 2 times sine of x. I don't need the product rule to find the derivative of 2 times sine of x. I can just find the derivative of sine of x, which is cosine, and multiply by 2. Let's just think about this part first. As I go to find the derivative, my first function, so the f part, f of x, is the 2x, and then the second part, the g of x, is the cosine of x. So, looking back at our notation, we did f prime of x first. So I'm going to do the derivative of 2x, which is just 2. Then I'm putting in g of x. In this case, that's just cosine of x. Plus f of x, which was 2x, times the derivative of g of x, in this case the derivative of cosine. The derivative of cosine is negative sine of x. Okay, then we actually need to add the derivative of the 2 sine of x. So I'm just going to write that in down here. The derivative of 2 sine of x is 2 cosine of x. We learned how to do that one today. Okay, so put it all together. We have 2 cosine of x, 2 cosine of x. That makes 4 cosine of x. And then 2x times negative sine of x, negative 2x sine of x. And that's our derivative for the whole function. Actually, I just noticed something. I covered up, this is supposed to be a minus sign. So let me go back in. This should not be a plus. It should be minus. That means here this should also be a minus. And in that case, 2 cosine of x and minus 2 cosine of x, that cancels. Sorry about that error, guys. So our final derivative is just negative 2x sine of x. These cancel. Alright, that's it for this video. There will be another video on the quotient rule. Thanks for listening.